Welcome to Reframe the podcast, helping you reframe your thought patterns, habits and mindsets to create the life that you want to lead. It is so lovely to be back with the podcast. I love recording these conversations, and today's episode was no exception. It is with Nicola Hatfield, who is a mindset and confidence coach. And what's really interesting about today's conversation is that we recorded it in the summer, just as we were told that we could all take these tentative new steps out of lockdown, out of the pandemic, and that shapes a lot of what we talk about today. We talk about what does that mean for our boundaries. Now, there's been this blurring of lines. Many of us are working from home, how it impacts our energy levels and how we're using this experience to reassess what it is we want from life and what we want our lives to look like. Hi, Nicola, and welcome to Reframe Club, the podcast. It's a joy to have you here today. And I think a very good place to start would be to have you tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
Great, thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to our conversation. So a little bit about me. I'm a mindset and confidence coach. So supporting women specifically on a one-to-one basis, but also working with organisations and social enterprises to deliver group wellbeing workshops and webinars. So my main focus is helping individuals to develop greater confidence, manage overwhelm, and also gain clarity on kind of what it is exactly that they want to do with their life and how they can go about doing that. And I always say, whether it's something huge or a big milestone that you're trying to reach, or generally that you just want to improve a little bit each day, that's really where I come in to help support people to think differently, take positive action and achieve their goals, all whilst feeling at their best. I think that's a really key thing, because a lot of the clients that I work with and something that I can really relate to myself is being successful on paper yet feeling unfulfilled. And I think the work that I do, and I'm sure you're similar in terms of from a coaching stance, is how to feel at your best so that you can show up as your best self in the different domains of your life, whether that's in work, as a partner, as a friend, as a colleague, as well as reaching the success and the results that you're striving for.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said a key word there. You said, you said domains of our lives. And I think that's, we forget, don't we, that we are this whole self. And there's all these facets that are interplay and interweave in helping us, as you say, show up, fulfill our potential, be successful, and actually, more importantly, feel at peace. And a lot of our life kind of trying to fit ourselves into boxes that aren't shaped like us. But obviously a big part of that, and a big area that obviously from my point of view is important to me, is that domain of health. So in your work, how would you define that? What's the importance of health in that picture?
Yeah, good question. And I think it's an interesting one, because I imagine at different stages of life it might be defined in a different way. I'd say for me, with my work, and something that how I look at health is feeling great mentally and physically. And of course, it's about eating well, whether that's sort of a balanced and colourful diet, for lack of a better word, but also about getting fresh air, about having time with friends, about connecting and movement and laughter. And it's much more of a holistic stance on health, and something that I do fundamentally believe everyone can access. Might be that there's sort of changes that need to be made, or certain areas of life that might need a bit more focus on. You could have a healthy way of eating, yet be unhealthy when it comes to your work habits or work relationships. Something that a lot of people I think are mentioning at the moment is this idea of toxic productivity. And I have to be honest and say it's something that I noticed within myself in the last, year or so, for lack of other things to do. I suppose I found myself working a lot, and there were lack of boundaries. So whilst I love doing exercise and eat well and feel healthy physically, that is an example of an unhealthy area that I had to kind of address. So I guess it's an all-rounded approach, thinking of your mindset as well as your physical body, that need to be kept in check. So it's not an easy task, but definitely something that is obviously really, really important. And there are many ways and modalities, I guess, that you can use to help improve health in certain areas.
You hit the nail on the head there with your own experiences, like over the past year, this toxic productivity. And obviously at the time of recording this, we're coming to the summer of 2021. We're coming, hopefully, fingers crossed, out of the back of the pandemic, fingers crossed. Equally, this whole experience over the last year and a half, I think has fundamentally changed for many of us the way we view our working life, our personal life, our relationships, and as you say, that wider picture of what pertains to health and the meaning of health. I read the other day an article that said, we're not working from home now, we're living at work. And I thought, that is so true, that blurring of lines, you know, where we don't have that transition to and from work.
Yeah.
You know, we're not making a commute, we're not walking, we're not on the train, we're constantly available. Your office is calling, you know, you think you've stopped. And actually, I think that has, for many, impacted our mental well-being.
100%. I think it's exactly that. There's no clear end of the day, you know, especially in winter when it was dark and we couldn't go out. Sort of, why wouldn't you work in a way? Because it was giving you a purpose, it was giving you a bit of structure in a time where there was a lack of structure and a lack of uncertainty. And the default for a lot of people was to just rely on the work as that sort of constant in their life, and something they could put their attention to without having to think too widely at what was going on externally. And then before you know it, you haven't had a lunch break, you're working, you know, from 8 a.m. till 7 p.m, then maybe even again an hour later on, which is why something like boundaries is so important, but very hard to implement if you either haven't got them in place yet or you have a lack of confidence in how to set them. So it can suddenly get quite complicated.
Yeah, I think we have to bring some awareness to it, don't we? Because I think we've probably now embedded a lot of this. I know that my husband doesn't listen to this podcast, but so he won't mind me saying, he'll never know I've said this. But he walks around with his phone like permanently glued to his hand. He is constantly available, and he works across several time zones. There is always a calling. And I have to say to him, it will always be there. Work will always be there unless you draw the line, unless you, as you say, assert that boundary and put a fence in place that says, no, you know, for the next 2 hours, I'm not available. So there's a bit of work there, isn't there? There's bringing our awareness to it. There's accepting also compassionately that it's happened, because I think we can fall foul into this whole kind of, it's another thing we beat ourselves up about. See, I'm working too much on top of everything else, and I haven't got my life work boundaries right. And we do throw these words in the coaching world. We kind of throw the words like boundaries and asserting ourselves and confidence. We kind of bound them around, but the truth is, it takes a lot of time, as you said, and it takes a lot of confidence to put those in place, doesn't it? And you know, where do you think we can start? Because I think it can feel really big when someone says, well, just assert your boundaries. And you're thinking, well, actually, what if my boss thinks, you know, I've made myself available 24/7 for the last year. What if he thinks, you know, I'm not doing my job? What if my partner thinks I don't care about them? What if my mum doesn't think I give a monkeys anymore because I can't do, you know, X, Y, and Z 3 times a week? You know, where do we start with that?
Yeah, very good question. And I think, and there's different sort of routes, I suppose, that people could take. I think if we think of work as a way of starting, it depends obviously on the nature of your role and I guess the hours you're expected to be working. But one thing that I think is really key and might seem a little bit daunting is the piece around communication. So if you realize that you haven't been taking a lunch break, you know, most days, or you have been working until 7 when strictly speaking you're only asked to work until 5:30, or you realize that you're having to work on a weekend sometimes, communicating that to a manager, a partner, a colleague, and letting them know that actually this has been going on and this is the time that you would like to look at amending that. So do you say to yourself, actually, I'm not going to open my emails until 9 o'clock every morning? Do you say, I'm going to take a half an hour lunch break as a non-negotiable? Once you've found something that's realistic to you, because we'll all be different, based on our commitments, and especially if you've got children and you're at home, it might not be that you can work until 5:30, for example. Work out what makes sense for you and then communicate that to a manager or to a partner if you work for yourself, almost as that accountability, but also in letting them know that this is why a new boundary is being implemented, and moving forward, this is how it will be. And I think when we have that conversation, because a lot of the time I believe other people in the team or other, your sort of senior managers might not realize the extent to which you are working. And it's not necessarily their responsibility to come in and change things. It's your own responsibility to do that. So that's like a very small example. For people listening that have their own businesses or side hustles, or their founders, that's obviously a sort of different challenge in itself. But something that I saw the other day, a couple of weeks ago, a lady who's got her own business, and it's something that I've spoken to one of my clients about, around setting boundaries on their email, because I read a study that sort of said the amount of time that people spend flitting in and out of their inbox on a daily basis wastes so much time because they have no clear boundaries on the relationship with their inbox. And one of the examples they gave, which, to be honest, I think I'm going to look at doing, because I think it's such a nice way of communicating this boundary, is in their email signature, is to say, it was something like, because I'm an advocate of positive well-being, it's really important for me that I manage, how much time I'm spending in my inbox. Therefore, it might take me up to 48 hours to get back to you. If there's anything urgent, here's my number. So it was a very subtle and polite way, I think, of communicating in that signature, so that when anyone emailed them, they knew, actually, okay, she might not be looking at her emails in the next hour. If it isn't urgent, she will get back to, she'll get back to me at some point. And just having something like that in place can actually make a difference, and allows you to have a bit more space and take the pressure off constantly being at the beck and call of other people.
So, in the field that we're, I think in any workplace, especially if you are working on an employed basis, in terms of modeling for your direct reports, modeling for your peers, modeling for our kids, and those we love around us, is being congruent, isn't it? And I think there's getting over that hurdle, that mental hurdle, that asserting boundaries is rude.
Exactly.
Rude. And actually that comes down to the communication thing, isn't it? And it can be packaged up in a way that doesn't feel confrontational. And we mustn't assume. I think that's something we do as humans a lot in our relationships. We assume that the other person is going to think negatively, or the other person is going to make a judgment about us. But actually, if we can assume that they'll be fine with it, it's much easier to make those decisions, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think something that you said there, as with the boundaries of the impact it might have. Well, what are the impacts it might have on those, your immediate family, your partner, your children? That's we want to model that behaviour to them as well. Yes, we might not be saying no to a work commitment, but by not saying no to a work commitment, we're saying no to spending time with people we love, or our own free time. And that in itself I think is motivation enough to have the confidence to say no, or to have the confidence to say, actually, I can't do this today, I'll do it tomorrow. And letting that be the reason for kind of implementing those boundaries.
Yeah, and trying to get over that people pleasing voice. And it's something I feel like I'm getting much better at it, and not setting myself up for over delivering and over promising. So I have this terrible, I've got much better, this terrible habit of, say, a client would require something, and I would endeavor to get it there that afternoon. And now I'll give myself 24 hours, 48 hours, and say, I'll be able to do this for you by Thursday. And that feels much kinder. But saying no segues us very beautifully and seamlessly into the subject of, because actually when we talk about boundaries, when we talk about work, when we talk about health, we're talking about pleasing or validating or making ourselves accountable to external things. external voices. And an external thing that I come up against a lot is diet culture, and trying to give men and women, increasingly men, the confidence to say, no, I'm not buying into that. You know, for me, well, I didn't grow up with social media. You know, there is just nothing but social media now. Do you think there is more pressure to look a certain way these days? I mean, and how do you see diet culture negatively impacting people that you work with?
Yeah, I think social media sort of does amplify that pressure because we have access to seeing anyone and everyone in, like, at the touch of our fingertips. However, I do think things are changing in the sense that many brands are, I believe, looking for much more of a diverse representation of the everyday person. Whereas previously, you know, sort of even 5-6 years ago, it was the typical sort of 6-foot, super skinny model that didn't represent the average person. So I think that's definitely a positive thing. I think as well, influencers that are using social media are having to be much more real when it comes to who they are as a person, you know, not always using filters, showing themselves sitting down and having a tummy roll because that's normal. And people resonate much more with that honesty, I think, because it does represent the vast majority of the population. In terms of how it negatively impacts people, and I think unfortunately it is something that people perhaps struggle with when they're younger, and then as they grow up begin to adopt their own beliefs and their own realizations around how they want to feel, more importantly, versus how they look. Ultimately, the diet culture means that people sort of live their life based on what they think others deem attractive. So once again, it's that other person. So they choose foods based on the fact they think it will make them skinny, and that's good because that will get them liked, or that will help them be successful. But as we get older and as we learn more about our bodies and the importance of health and, you know, the importance of a balanced diet, I do think people then begin to be more comfortable. The issue is you then have to sort of work at unlearning what you've led to believe is true up until that point, which that then takes time and mindset work and sort of allowing yourself to do things in a different way than you might have been for the first 20 years or 23 years of your life.
It's interesting because I think you're absolutely right. I think the older we get, the more perspective we get on what we value in life and so forth. However, there is this juxtaposition that I come across a lot. We know from within disordered eating, there are kind of two hotspots in life. There's puberty, when the body's transitioning through this major change, and the menopause. And I work a lot with women who are in their 50s who there's this conflict between, you know, suddenly they're no longer the caretakers at home, life is transitioning, things are changing, they want to, as you say, connect with their authentic selves, they want to feel more confident, but they're carrying decades of diet culture and decades of the thin ideal and decades of dieting. I mean, something ridiculous, like 17 years is the average amount of time a woman will spend on a diet in her lifetime. If you add all the diets up together, it can be 17 years. That's a lot of work. But the juxtaposition comes because your body changes, it softens during menopause, and it's partly a protective thing. It's to do with estrogen and protecting our heart. And I think that's where the conflict comes, because we are still and you're absolutely right, there is this beautiful swelling within social media, this movement that is happening. And as you say, we're seeing more influencers turning up authentically, only wanting to work with brands who are representative and diversifying and all of those things. But if we really drill down to it, we still live in a fat phobic society. And we still idolize thin, and we still see and we still hear in the news, they're putting calories on menus, they're prescribing fruit and veg as of this morning, on which is, fruit and veg is vital and incredibly important, but it doesn't look at the bigger issue. So I think I absolutely hope and believe you're right, because my girls are, well, my children are, my son is turning 15, my daughter's turning 13, and my youngest is 10.
Yeah.
And my girls are being brought up in a world where they are looking at, accounts that talk about body acceptance and body neutrality, and they're well versed in this language, but she'll still come home from school and say, so and so is not eating carbs.
Really?
Yeah. And there's this, I think we've got this groundswell, as you say, but still this, until the idea of what is acceptable in society changes, we're butting, and we've got to but we have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing for the change for the next generations. And I really hope it changes for our children's children.
Yeah, I think it's so hard to know what could ever happen that means it wouldn't be a problem. I think perhaps because things like coaching and positive well-being and positive psychology are becoming more widely known and talked about, that's actually a stance that could really help if it's taught in schools and it's communicated with children from a young age around the emphasis of how you feel versus how you look, and strategies and techniques to build confidence, to build self-belief, to build let go of judgment, let go of comparison. Obviously that's not an easy feat, but that's not something that I was taught at school.
No.
And I don't think is particularly widely taught at the moment, if commonly at all. So actually, if we have that focus, that might be a way of starting to help I guess bridge that gap between where we are now and ideally where we would like to be, and then having that conversation, bringing it up with all generations, so that it's something that we focus on more in a positive light versus how we physically look.
You and I have come to this work later in life and done the work, but as you say, if we had it at school, I can imagine traversing my teenage years would have been a very different kettle of fish, for sure. Those terrible, awkward, painful teenage years that I don't know, yours may have been a breeze, but mine were hideous. Working in the realms of coaching, in particular mindset and confidence, what do you consider then to be, obviously we've talked a little bit about workplace health, our relationship with work, but how does that relationship between taking care of our health and being able to have a healthier mindset play out in your experience?
I think they're obviously intrinsically linked, and it's vitally important to look at our mindset. And personally, for me, actually, I had always had an interest and placed importance on sort of physical fitness, but it was only up until about 2.5 years ago that I began to understand and really find fascinating our mental fitness as well. And I remember reading something a while ago, sort of a couple of years ago now, and they pointed out that so often people will look to seek support for their mindset at a point where they've hit rock bottom almost, rather than it being something that people do on a daily basis, because you can't see the sort of physical outcome. Whereas exercise, people do, well, those that are into fitness or sort of vaguely into health and fitness will probably do it at least 2 or 3 times a week, perhaps, in whatever form that might be, because they know that it's important. So placing importance on our mindset and our physical, mental fitness, as it were, is extremely important and something that we should look to do daily, even when we're feeling great, but especially when we're not feeling great. And the tendency is to not want to do the things when we're feeling tired or drained or frustrated, but actually they're the things that we can turn to that we know are going to help us feel better. And I think health is linked to that, because health, you'll know more than me, but the gut-brain connection, the foods that we eat, the nutrients that we consume, and as well our lifestyle, so the sleep, the water, the stress, and that just all contributes to our mindset and kind of how we show up each day.
Yeah, massively. Totally agree. And the point you made about the fact that actually at the times when we need it most, and we feel the less inclined are the times where we that's when we need to practice it. And I think, as you said, with exercise, there are very tangible measurements. You can get up the stairs without getting so out of breath. You can go longer in your yoga class. That muscle gets bigger. But mindset, we have to kind of change and this is something I talk about with clients a lot, about how they measure progress. They have an idea of where they should be and there is where they are and how long they want to go from A to Z. And actually, if we can reframe what progress is to us in terms of our mindset as well. So, how do we measure it? I guess is what I'm getting at. I'm talking in a really convoluted way, but how do we measure mindset improving? How does that play out in our lives? How do we know when we're actually attending to that side of ourselves?
I think it is very tricky, as you say, because it's not like, okay, in 30 days time I will be feeling like this. I think it's a case of introducing small daily actions that help you feel better. So if you're someone that struggles with stress, what do you can do that will help you relieve stress? Is it getting fresh air? Is it spending less time on your phone? Is it reading in the morning? Is it whatever it might be? And almost setting yourself a little challenge that you're going to do this every day for the next 30 days. And just by doing that, I personally do find it hard as well, is how you can remember how you felt a month ago. Now, I think that's why a lot of people use journaling, because you can look back. But I also appreciate that doesn't necessarily resonate with everyone, and it does take a bit of time. Also, just sometimes I even put reminders in my diary for sort of 30 days, 60 days as like a check-in, like, how am I feeling? I used to get stressed out at things seemingly quite small. So sitting in a traffic jam would really frustrate me because I hate being late. I'd always make sure I'm on time, and that's something totally out of my control. It would just really irritate me. Now I can confidently say things like that actually just don't stress me out, because A, I realize it's out of my control. B, I understand how to reframe situations, and C, it's sort of not worth draining more of your energy on something that is out of your control. So I can look back and say, okay, well, because I put time into working on my mindset, because I understand how reframing works, I now can confidently say my sort of mental fitness or my mindset has improved in that area because I don't feel as much stress. Generally speaking, I don't really ever feel particularly stressed or overwhelmed. And it's not because I sit on the sofa all day. I think it's because I commit daily to doing things that I know support me. And that's not necessarily always, meditation, breath work, visualization. Whilst I do some of that, it's also getting enough sleep. It's also going outside. It's also drinking enough water. And these are all things that we do that will help positively impact our health and mindset, which is why I think everyone is sort of capable of achieving that. It's just the perseverance and the commitment that comes to implementing them. And more importantly, understanding why it is that you want to be doing this on a daily basis versus someone else telling you to do it because you think it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. We tend to come in with an all or nothing kind of attitude to these things and think suddenly we're going to turn into Joe Wicks and we're going to be this committed. But actually, breaking it down into those really small steps makes it more achievable. And perhaps it is just writing on a scale of 1 to 10 how you feel each day at the top of a diary, or using an emoji, and then being able to look back and say, actually, consistently for the last 10 days I've had smiley faces, so something is working. Energy flows where attention goes, right? And it's bringing awareness. And I talk to my clients a lot about this, about how we can build in these pauses between reacting and responding, because it's in that pause is where we get to make the choice. So when you're in that traffic queue and your limbic system begins to work itself into a frenzy, you have a choice, don't we? By creating that, noticing, I can feel myself getting, a little bit raw. I have a choice. I have a choice to either let this go, or I can continue down this path of getting enraged by the slow moving traffic. But how is that going to serve me? I don't think we give energy a value. So if we valued energy in the same way we value money, for example, we'd be much more careful about how we expend it. If someone
Definitely.
said, well, you're going to go £20 into your overdraft by getting yourself in a tiz over that traffic queue,
Yeah.
you'd calm yourself down.
Yeah.
And you'd be much more likely to keep some money back to attend to the things that
Yeah.
you want to do. You want to go on holiday, so I'm not going to go waste it by
Mm.
burning energy over here, by working beyond my contracted hours every night of the week.
Yeah.
And I think there's
Yeah.
something there about how we value energy and how we can use it,
Mm.
and how do we use that energy to make the changes in our lives. If you have the energy to make those really small commitments every day, then you're constantly building a credit in the bank, aren't you? You're always
Yeah.
going to be, you're going to be far more in credit. But I think we're constantly trying to run on 2 pennies and 5 pence pieces.
And it's really interesting that you say that, because that's something that I have been looking into more relatively recently, is this concept of managing energy versus managing time. And that links back to the idea of boundaries as well. Is boundaries are there to protect your energy. You know, it's not that you don't want to interact with other people, it's not that you don't want to do things for other people, it's that we need to better manage our energy. And it's this idea that, you know, if we wake up, let's say typically speaking, everyone wakes up with 100% energy, providing you've had a good sleep. You know, it might be some days that it's slightly less. So if we think of our day as gradually as being made up of things that are energy drainers and energy boosters, and then you look ahead to your week and say, okay, looking at my diary, what are these things that are energy drainers? What's boosting me? Anything in your diary that you think, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to do that, or I don't know why I said yes, or that's causing me to feel stressed already, and it's already, you know, 3 days away. That's examples of putting the boundaries in place and saying, actually, I'm going to move that, or I'm going to say no, or I'm going to politely decline, because those are things that will drain your energy. And yes, of course, there'll be things that might cause us stress or that are draining, you know, because that's just the way that life is. It's important that we have things in there that boost our energy as well. And that, I guess, comes back to your mindset and your health, is having activities or time or rituals in place that help to bring up and sort of refill that energy bar, so that we're not at the end of the day, when it comes to spending time with our kids or our family or our partner, at 10% energy. And that's not really fun for anyone.
Yeah, no. Why should they be getting the worst of us rather than the
Yeah.
best of us? And as you were speaking, you said about being kind of our future friend and looking through our diaries and seeing where are the deficits and where are the boosts. I was thinking, do you know what I'm going to do? I have a month I plan out the month. I'm going to go with a highlighter, 2 different coloured highlighters. And I'm going to highlight everything that's energy boosting that's in my diary, and everything that is energy draining. And it'd be really interesting exercise to see which colour comes out most frequently, wouldn't it? You know, because I think sometimes we have to see it visually. We have to have it in a really clear way put in front of us, because we always kind of discount. You know, we're prone to discounting as a thinking style. So we'll always look for the, you know, oh, well, it doesn't really matter if I don't do that for myself, because it's much more important I do this thing. But if we could see it visually in front of us, I think that would be quite a powerful thing to do.
I think that's a good idea. And then it allows you to make some adjustments ahead of time if there is an imbalance.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke a little bit earlier about self-care, and you said, you know, I think in the world of wellness, there is a lot of emphasis on things like journaling and meditation and visualization, and, you know, you just need to manifest your 6 figures and all of that jazz. Which it isn't, is it? It is about getting the basics. And for me, also, self-care is about acknowledging your truth. So not putting yourself out, not making yourself uncomfortable, not making decisions that don't feel aligned to your values and beliefs, because that's not self-care, that's self-neglect. Plus the healthy basics. So we cannot function. You will have brain fog, you will find it hard to concentrate, you will feel low, you'll be disinclined to exercise because blood pumps around your body slower if you're dehydrated. You know, those things are really important. But, you know, how do you support yourself with self-care? You know, you said that you meet the small actions and there are the big ones, but how do you make sure that you do that every day?
I've got into the habit of planning, almost as you were saying, sort of planning your month. And I do plan into the future. I definitely plan most of my week a week in advance. And that will include things like when I'm going to exercise, scheduling times in for a walk. If I know that I've got a really busy morning, I'll put in a block of half an hour for a walk at lunchtime, because I know that I'll need the fresh air to help me kind of feel re-energized and re-motivated for the afternoon. I also make sure that I don't commit to too many things in the evening, because whilst I'm not someone that needs 12 hours of sleep or a nap in the afternoon, I do know that between 7 to 8 hours is a priority for me. And if I don't have that, it will knock my ability to focus, my energy levels the next day. So I make sure that I'm prioritizing that, and almost, I guess, working backwards to make sure that that is something that I'm committing to. And something that you mentioned earlier around having that sort of time to pause to respond versus react, something that I speak about to clients and my best to implement myself is creating more mindful moments throughout the day. So that's just a chance to stop for even a minute and take a breath, before a meeting, before a call with a client, before picking your kids up from school, giving yourself a minute just to be mindful. And it sounds almost a bit ridiculous, but actually when we have those mindful moments, we can tune in and think, how is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I need now? Do I actually just need to shut my laptop down for 10 minutes? Do I need to call a friend? Maybe I have realized I need a little bit of a sugar kick and want to go and get some chocolate. If we don't allow time for that, we just operate on this autopilot, sort of fast moving hamster wheel, that no wonder we feel drained, no wonder our confidence is knocked, no wonder we're exhausted, because we haven't actually stopped to listen to our body. And hopefully that does resonate with people listening, because I know that it might sound a little bit sort of not woo-woo, but listening to our body. It's more just pausing and thinking, what would make me feel a little bit better now? And going with that initial instinct versus thinking, oh, well, it's 4 o'clock, so I have to work for another hour and a half before I can go and have a break. It's like, well, you could have a 10-minute break now. And if you need to work an extra 10 minutes after 5:30, well, then so be it. But sort of challenging the norm, I guess, a bit around that, and breaking free from a routine that we might have been so accustomed to living by, and realizing that we can kind of create new habits within an existing routine.
Absolutely. And it doesn't sound woo at all to me. It's everything I subscribe to. I work within the framework of intuitive eating. So it's exactly that. It's about, we call it interoceptive awareness. So tuning back into our bodies. And we don't do it anymore. We kind of externalize everything. When you need a wee, but we tend to ignore everything else. All the other signs. There's not the allocated time for a break, even though I'm exhausted and I really need to go. I really need to go and eat something. And the question you mentioned there, that I think is a really powerful question, and one that we should all practice asking consistently throughout our day, is what do I really need in this moment? Because if we don't, what we tend to do is we then attend things that perhaps impact us negatively in the long term. So if we ignore our needs all day, so we don't eat, for example, we restrict all day because we don't make time, or we think we're being good or whatever, then we end up triggering primal hunger. And I talk about face planting the biscuit tin, that that's what happens. Or we end up leaning into a bottle of wine because actually we haven't attended in those micro moments throughout the day our stress. So by the time it gets to the end of the day, we're just this overboiling kettle, and we know that if we have a massive great big glass of Pinot Noir, we're going to feel better. But the knock-on impact of that. So it's understanding that that there's a difference between attending our well-being for the future, for that medium long term, and that short term fix. And the other thing I loved that you said was about working backwards. So you said, I put it in my diary and I work backwards from there, because we tend to fit self-care in like the add-on. So it's the first thing to drop, the last thing to go in, and the first thing to drop. It's like, oh, I'd love to get to Pilates this week, but actually it didn't happen, so I'll let it go. And putting parameters around that says, no, that is a non-negotiable. And giving yourself permission to make that a non-negotiable is vital, as you say, and understanding the value of that in your life. We have to make space. If we want things to become consistent and we want to be committed, we have to make space. Otherwise, we're just trying to ram a card into a tightly squeezed deck. That's really wise. And the other thing you mentioned there, again, and I think it's something we can all bring awareness to, is our rhythms. When do you work best?
And I think that it's definitely something that we've just been programmed to believe is the right way of doing things, i.e. starting work at 9, finishing at 6, having an hour or half an hour lunch break between 12 and 1. But I definitely think this past year has proven that we can change the norm, as it were.
Yeah.
And if, you know, it's 4 o'clock and you do need to go for a walk, and you think, oh, I can't because my manager will ask me where I'm going, or just communicate and say, actually, I'm going for a 15-minute walk to get some fresh air because I've realised I have a bit of an energy dip, and this really helps give me an extra fuel of focus and motivation for the next 2 hours. I can guarantee that they won't turn around and say, you're not allowed to do that. And, you know, it's sort of taking that responsibility and, as you say, acknowledging what works best. And if you do realise that you work better in the morning, you know, is there a conversation that you could have with your manager that says, could I start working at 8 and finish at 4:30 because I'm significantly more productive, and I really believe that this will have a positive impact on my output and also my relationship with my colleagues.
Yeah.
And it's all about having those conversations.
Yeah, and communication, definitely. And if we work in an environment where, you know, we have to be present, you know, if you're a nurse, you're working in retail, any of those things, that's a little bit harder. But then it's making sure that when those opportunities arise in your working patterns, that you full-heartedly take them. It's really tempting, isn't it, to sit in the staff room and scroll on our phones for that 40-minute break, but actually take that moment to go outside and get a breath of fresh air and make space for them. Yeah, for sure.
And I think it's sort of, as you mentioned, you know, having the things that we put into our diary, like our Pilates class, our swimming class, our walk with a friend, that we tend to let go of straight away. When it comes to that point, just remembering why you put it in the first place. You know, you put that in because you enjoy doing it and it makes you feel good. So it's ironic that we then let that be the first thing that we are happy to remove. And yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the point around, you know, if you are a nurse or you are a teacher and you can't just sort of take these breaks, what is it that you can do that's a sort of miniature version of a Pilates class? You know, is it that moment of stillness? Is it an opportunity to be away from your phone or away from other people and breathe? That can be done even in a bathroom, and it's not obviously the most glamorous of places.
No, but it can be.
Finding that little spot and just saying, I just need 2 minutes out. And I think 2 minutes is probably realistic in most situations.
Yeah. Go and have a wee, take a few deep breaths, roll your shoulders a few times, relax your jaw and reset. Yeah. Actually, it all counts because you'll put in coinage in that energy bank. You know, it might feel like coinage and not notes, but it's still, they all add up. You know, pennies make a pound.
If we do it every day, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, we don't know what's going to happen this afternoon. So if we're building up a solid foundation where we're feeling good, or we're feeling calm, or we're feeling sort of stable, when we do get faced with challenges or things that catch us off guard or moments of stress, we have already built up that foundation versus turning to it in times where we have no option but to do it. So, you know, for people that aren't necessarily accustomed to doing this regularly, having a reminder on your phone at 3 o'clock every day that just sort of says breathe or take a moment or a reminder, and get into the habit of doing that on the days that you're, you know, from now onwards, because subconsciously you are actually building up that sort of muscle of that the mindset that's supporting you, that's going to be stronger when faced with a more challenging time. Maybe notice how you respond then versus how you might have 6 months ago. And whilst it won't be put down solely to that sort of one activity you do each day that helps you with your mindset, that has a knock-on effect, that has a ripple effect on everything else. So it really is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. The foundations and not the sirens. They shouldn't be blues and twos. You know, taking time for self-care shouldn't be like making a 911 call, should it? It's like, oh, quick, I must meditate because I'm on the floor. No, stop you getting on the floor in the first place. What 3 simple steps do you think our club members could take away today that would immediately benefit them then?
So I've got a variety of things. So one of them, I think, and it links back to initial conversation about sort of social media and pressures that come from the external people, I guess, in our environment. So I'd say to carry out a little bit of a Instagram, maybe to begin with, but general social media audit. So removing profiles that trigger you, that make you feel bad about yourself, or that spark kind of unwelcomed emotions. I think it's very easy just to keep scrolling, but just have a look at who you are following and whether they're there and positively impacting how you're feeling. So I'd say that would be the first one. Secondly, is to get into the habit of setting an intention each day. And I think a nice way of looking at this is just to choose a word that you want to embody that day. And that might be curiosity, kindness, patience, enthusiasm, and spend 1 minute, because I appreciate that, we haven't all got loads of time, 1 minute choosing the word, and then just almost running through in your mind what your day ahead looks like. So are you going into any shops? Who are you going to be speaking to? Who might you come in contact with? And how can you embody that word as much as possible in your day ahead? And it just is a really nice way of helping to kind of point the arrow in the direction that you want your day to go. And if you can do that every day, it's such a lovely way of A, being a bit more aware, but B, being more intentional around your day and how you want to feel. That'd be my second one. And then the third simple step is to write down at the end of each day 3 wins, or even start off with 1. Let's keep it super simple. 1 or 3 wins at the end of each day. Now, the reason why I think this is so great and something that we can really easily implement is to help boost that confidence, but also a stronger mindset around all the things that we are doing, that we are achieving, that are making us feel good. Because there's still so much focus and praise, I think, in society at the moment around action, achievement, progress, growth, that we so often overlook the things that we are already achieving and doing, and that are already making us feel great. So by taking a moment at the end of the day to acknowledge a great conversation, something that made us smile, a surprise, or a big project, maybe a promotion or signing a new client, that just helps gradually. It's sort of once again linked to that foundation of achievement. And when we have that sense of achievement, it helps us with motivation. When we have motivation, we're better at focusing. So it's just getting into that habit of doing that before you shut your laptop down and actually savoring those moments versus thinking, okay, done, what's next? Which I think we're all guilty of. And I've definitely got a lot better at. And it is so nice just to kind of reflect and look at what we're doing versus sort of what we've got next to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that you used the word embodied. Take that intention and embody it, because it is about how do you want to feel. And the question we ask everybody, and it's a big question, everyone goes, oh, that's a hard one. If you were on a mountain with the whole world's population below you, listening to you, what would you tell them?
So I would say, and this is probably something that I have been kind of trying to share more widely recently, is quit waiting for one day because it doesn't exist. And
oh, I like that, Nicola.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. People, the most common I guess objection I might get when it comes to people working with a coach or people investing in themselves, whether that's with a personal trainer or a coach or a mentor or whoever it might be, is it's not the right time, or maybe in 6 months, or it's just maybe one day. And the longer you wait, the longer we put it off, the sort of longer it will take to get to where you want to be. And we have these intentions of doing it ourselves, of keeping ourselves accountable, but it doesn't have the same impact. And I think if there is a new business you want to set up, if there is someone that you've been thinking about reaching out to, if there is a new hobby you want to try, just go for it and do it today. That one day might never come. And I would always prefer to say, at least I tried, versus looking back and regretting either not doing it sooner or regretting never doing it and holding on to that kind of what if feeling.
As you say, just doing it. Just do it.
Yeah.
And finally, where can people find you, learn more about your work?
So I'm on Instagram with Nicola Charlotte Coaching. I have recently got into Reels, which kind of makes me laugh and question myself all at the same time. So I literally about 2 weeks ago, I thought I'll never do Reels. Like, that's not for me. Don't see how I just don't get them. And now I just love doing them. So check those out on my Instagram. And then my website is nicolasharlotte.com. So yeah, got lots of information, but please do reach out with questions, thoughts, anything. I would be delighted to hear.
And thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today. It's been a pleasure and a privilege, Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you're able to take something of value away from today's episode. Perhaps one small action you can put into practice today. If you are enjoying Reframe, then please do subscribe and rate the podcast, as this helps us reach more lovely listeners. As always, here at Reframe Club, we are rooting for you.